I want to introduce you to an idea that comes from an unusual source, and I want to apply it to a context that I think illuminates something that most content about difficult marriages never reaches, never even comes close to, frankly. The idea is called suicidal empathy. And the idea comes from evolutionary psychologist Gad Saad, who defines it as what happens when empathy becomes hyperactive, when it is deployed without rational calibration, directed at the wrong targets, and decoupled from any honest assessment of consequences. Let me explain, let me unpack that. Saad's framework is primarily concerned with politics and culture. We're not going to go there. But when I encountered his thinking, I immediately recognized something that I've been watching for 30 years in the therapy room. Because the women that we work with are, many of them, some of the most empathic people I've ever encountered. And their empathy, which is a genuine gift, a capacity for deep felt understanding of another person's interior experience, is also, in the specific context of their marriages, operating in a way that is quietly destroying them. They feel too much of what he feels, and they absorb too much of what he carries. They respond to his distress with a fullness and a speed that leaves their own needs perpetually number 2 or 3 or 4 on the list. And the marriage, which his behavior is slowly making into an unsafe place, continues to receive the full devotion of an empathetic system that has no off switch and no rational audit. That, I want to suggest, is suicidal empathy, not in the political sense that Saad intends, in the intimate, daily, domestic sense that is costing these women their lives. Before we go further, this is a more conceptually layered video than most on this channel, and I want to invite you into the conversation rather than just present it. If you want to continue this conversation with other women who are thinking seriously about their marriages, the Detox Your Marriage community is the place. The link is in the description below. Now, let's build this out and let's unpack this. Let's make sense of it. Trauma is not something you remember. It's something your nervous system learns. If you ever thought, I understand my trauma intellectually, but my body still does not feel safe, this book is written for you. In the Trauma Recovery Blueprint, I introduce the relational nervous system integration model. It's an integrative framework that bridges polyvagal theory, internal family systems, and EMDR-informed trauma healing. It helps explain how trauma reshapes the body, emotional patterns, relational expectations, and the nervous system itself. This is not simply a book about coping. This is a whole new framework for understanding healing. The Trauma Recovery Blueprint is out now on Amazon. Click the link below for more information. Gad Saad's core argument in his 2026 book, Suicidal Empathy, is that empathy, which is an evolved human capacity with genuine adaptive value, it becomes pathological when it's deployed without what he calls rational calibration. Suicidal empathy, as Saad defines it, is the inability to implement optimal decisions when one is psychologically conditioned to prioritize empathy or displays of empathy over a rational course of action. Sit with that for a little bit. Now, his primary targets are political and cultural, the elevation of sympathy over consequence in social policy, the silencing of honest assessment in the name of compassion. But the underlying mechanism he describes is something far more universal. Saad argues that empathy is an evolved module with adaptive value, but that it becomes pathological when it's weaponized into an infinite, uncalibrated response with no stopping mechanism. No stopping mechanism. That phrase stayed with me when I first encountered it, because the women that we work with, women in marriages with controlling, narcissistic, or emotionally dysregulated partners, frequently have precisely this problem. Their empathy has no stopping mechanism. His pain calls to them. His distress activates their caring response with an immediacy and a completeness that leaves almost no space for the question, what is this costing me? And the answer, accumulated over years, is this is costing me everything. Now, I want to bring in a very different voice, one that arrives at a remarkably similar place from an entirely different direction. Flannery O'Connor was a mid-20th century Catholic fiction writer, arguably the greatest American short story writer of her century, whose theological imagination was as rigorous as it was unsettling. And in her essays, particularly in one called Mystery and Manners, she made a distinction that I've returned to throughout my career. O'Connor was deeply suspicious of what she called sentimental piety, the tendency to substitute warm feeling for clear thought, to mistake the emotion of sympathy for the practice of virtue. I'm going to explain it. In her theological framework, drawing on the Catholic tradition, she distinguished between what she called tender feeling on one hand and mercy on the other. Tender feeling, which we might today call empathy, is a response. It is what arises when you observe someone's pain. It's real. It is, in O'Connor's understanding, it's morally neutral. It's neither a virtue nor a vice. It's just information. I'm observing somebody in pain, and I'm noticing, I'm collecting that information. Neutral. Mercy, by contrast, is a virtue in the Catholic tradition. It's what happens when that felt response to another's pain is submitted to rational, moral, and theological discernment, and then expressed in action that genuinely serves the other person's good. The distinction matters enormously, because mercy, unlike raw empathy, requires you to ask a question that empathy alone never asks. And that question is what I'm about to do actually good for this person? Or is it simply the fastest way to relieve my own discomfort at witnessing their pain? That's huge. O'Connor's characters in her fiction, who act from sentimental piety rather than genuine mercy, consistently cause harm to others and to themselves because they're following a feeling rather than pursuing a good. And those in O'Connor's ferociously honest theological universe, not the same thing. So if you're still with me, and I know this is thick and deep, and so I commend you for sticking with me as I walk through this. Here's the thing. What's remarkable to me, and what I want to invite you to sit with, is the convergence between these two thinkers. And this is remarkable. An evolutionary psychologist writing in 2026, commenting on the political and cultural landscape, and a Catholic fiction writer who died in 1964. Both are saying in their different registers and from different premises the same essential thing. Empathy, the felt, immediate, automatic response to another person's distress, is not in itself a virtue. It's not a good thing. It's just a response. A powerful human, genuinely beautiful faculty, but a faculty like any other that can be misused or miscalibrated. That can be directed at the wrong target, and it can be deployed without the rational and moral discernment that would distinguish between a response that genuinely serves and a response that simply relieves the respondent's own discomfort. Gadsad calls the miscalibrated version suicidal empathy. It's a powerful label. And O'Connor calls the unchecked version sentimentality. The clinical literature calls it emotional caretaking or the fawn response. I've spent 30 years watching it operate in marriages of women who love deeply and well, and who are being quietly consumed by the very capacity that makes them extraordinary. The emotion is not the problem. This is the point. The emotion is not the problem. The response is not the problem. The emotional response is not the problem. It's the absence of rational and moral discernment coupled that is the problem. The feeling unmediated by thought becomes the whole of the response. And in a relationship where one person's needs are consistently amplified and the other person's are consistently suppressed, that unmediated empathy is not love. It's dissolution. It's a disaster. So let me pull this together. Let me make it concrete, because I'm a clinician at the end of the day, not a philosopher. And my interest in these ideas is always in what they illuminate about real women in real home. So what suicidal empathy looks like inside a difficult marriage is this. Let me paint a picture. She feels what he feels. When he's in pain, even pain that he has manufactured or weaponized or deployed strategically to manage her, she feels it. And the feeling is real. She's not performing it. She's not imagining it. Her nervous system genuinely responds to his distress with the full activation of her caregiving response. And so she moves towards him, and she softens, and she adjusts, and she absorbs his pain into herself and processes it on his behalf and returns to him something that looks like understanding, care, and presence. And the partner, whether he consciously does it or not, learns that his pain produces this response in her. That his distress is the lever that reliably moves her towards him and away from whatever she was previously attending to, including herself. The tragedy is that what she's offering is genuine, her empathy is real, her care is real, but it's operating without the rational audit that would ask, does this actually serve him? Does this serve me? Is this the response that produces actual good in him, in me, in this marriage? Or is this simply the fastest way to relieve my discomfort of watching somebody I love in pain, even pain he's partly responsible for? That question, the O'Connor question, the sad question, is what her empathy has never been asked to answer. And the consequences of that unanswered question accumulate year after year in her body, in her sense of self, in the quiet disappearance of a woman who felt everything for everyone except herself. So I want to be clear about what I am saying and what I'm not saying. I'm not saying feel less. I'm not advocating emotional detachment or the cultivation of a harder, more defended self. That's not the goal. That doesn't make you more whole. And it's not a solution to the problem. What I'm saying is what Gad Saad, the evolutionary psychologist, and what Flannery O'Connor, the Catholic theologian, what those two voices are saying is that feelings, emotions need a partner, that empathy to function as a genuine virtue rather than as a faculty that consumes its possessor needs to be married or integrated with rational discernment to the honest question, is this response actually good for him, for me, for the relationship? So in the therapy room, I call this regulated empathy, the capacity to feel what another person is feeling, genuinely, fully, without suppression, and then make a deliberate, considered choice about how to respond to that feeling. Not to suppress it, not to act on it automatically, to feel it, to hold it, and choose. That choosing is what transforms empathy from a faculty into a virtue. That's what O'Connor meant by mercy. It's what I believe is available to every woman who has been consuming herself in service of somebody else's pain. When she learns to bring her intelligence and her self-knowledge into the same room as her feelings. The work of developing regulated empathy, of learning to fully feel and deliberately choose, rather than feel and respond automatically, or react, frankly, is among the most important work that I address in the trauma recovery blueprint. Because the women who come to me with the most disabling empathy responses are almost always the women whose nervous systems were trained in earlier relationships to treat another person's emotional state as their responsibility. To feel what another feels as a survival requirement. To suppress their own feelings as a condition of safety. That's a trauma response. And it's not resolved through cognitive reframing or through communication exercises. It's resolved through specific supported work of nervous system recovery, of learning in the body, not just in the mind, that her feelings matter, that her well-being is a legitimate claim on her own attention, and that genuine love, genuine mercy is not the erasure of self in service of another, but the full-souled, discerning, chosen giving of someone who remains whole while she gives. The Trauma Recovery Blueprint is on Amazon. The link is down below in the description. I want to close by saying something to the woman who recognizes herself in what I've described today. Your empathy is not a flaw. It's one of the remarkable things about you. And the goal is not to diminish it. The goal is to give it what it's always been missing, which is partnership of your own wisdom, your own needs, your own right to exist in a room as fully as anyone else. And you're worth doing it. I'll see you in the next video.